A wealthy man decides to sell his mansion without asking for a single dollar. But there is one condition. The couple who buys
You
it
must
must never
never
open the
open the
basement in the
cellar door.
backyard. If they keep that promise, the house will belong to them. But if the basement is opened, the mansion must be returned to the wealthy man. The couple assumes the man is joking. He offers no explanation. He only says it is already late and allows them to stay one night in the mansion. The next morning, the wealthy man is gone. On the table, the couple finds a
Dear John.
contract for the house with the exact same condition he mentioned the night before. And this is where their story begins. This is cellar door. However, the wife is thrilled, but the husband feels uneasy. He cannot believe anyone would give away a house for free without a hidden catch. In his mind, something terrible must be hidden inside the basement, or this is part of some clever scam. Soon after, a property agent appointed by the wealthy man arrives. She confirms that everything is legitimate and legal. As long as the contract is signed, the mansion will officially belong to the couple. The husband hesitates and tries to warn his wife, but she refuses to listen. Since they do not have to pay anything, he eventually signs the contract. Just like that, the mansion becomes theirs. But after they move in, strange things begin to happen. During a housewarming party, several odd incidents start to unfold. At the party, Alyssa suddenly shows up. John's expression changes immediately. Alyssa is his former lover, a woman who once became dangerously obsessed with him. After Sarah suffered a miscarriage in the past, John cut all ties with Alyssa. Seeing her again makes him feel uneasy. He pulls Alyssa aside to a quiet corner and confronts her about why she came. She claims she was invited by a friend and insists she has no bad intentions. Suddenly, Sarah's anxious scream echoes from outside. John rushes to the front of the house and finds a strange man standing in the yard holding a container of gasoline. The man warns John that the house must be burned immediately. If it is not destroyed, John will face a terrible fate. Despite the warning, no one takes the man seriously. The next day, as Sarah prepares to leave the house, she is greeted by a neighbor named Catherine. The conversation seems friendly at first, but before leaving, Catherine quietly says she hopes the couple can survive living in that house. The strange comment leaves Sarah confused and wondering what she meant. Meanwhile, when John arrives at work, he immediately notices everyone staring at him. Alyssa has filed a report with Human Resources, accusing him of sexual harassment and claiming she feels unsafe working in the same office as him. The accusation is completely fabricated, meant to destroy his life and his marriage. John tries to explain the truth, but the company suspends him while the investigation takes place. With no other choice, he returns home. The situation leaves him deeply stressed. He has been falsely accused, and at the same time, he needs a large amount of money for Sarah's fertility treatment. If the harassment accusation reaches Sarah, his life could completely fall apart. Later, while trying to calm himself on the terrace, John accidentally glances toward the basement door. The sight immediately brings back the thought that has been bothering him. He starts wondering again what might be hidden down there. Still stressed and with nothing to do, his curiosity grows stronger. The next day, he decides to try opening the basement door himself. Unfortunately, the door refuses to budge. It is locked so tightly that he cannot get it open. Because John keeps staring into space and acting distracted, Sarah begins to notice something is wrong. John finally points toward the basement door and insists that they should check what is inside. But Sarah has already grown comfortable living in the mansion. She does not want to risk losing the house, so she immediately refuses and warns him not to touch it. The following day, John goes jogging again. This time he makes a bold decision and contacts Alyssa, leaving a message asking to meet. After that, the thought of the basement continues to haunt him. If the main door cannot be opened, there must be another way inside. With that idea in mind, he visits the city planning office to request the blueprints of the house. Luckily, the office still has the building plans. While checking the files, the clerk casually mentions that a previous owner named Paul McManus once requested the same blueprints, but never came back to pick them up. Hearing that name surprises John. As far as he knows, the mansion belongs to Emmett. The clerk looks even more confused when he hears Emmett's name. According to him, it has been more than 25 years since anyone mentioned that man. The clerk then shares a little story about Emmett's past. Long ago, Emmett once held a lavish wedding celebration in that town, but not long after the marriage, his wife suddenly left him. After she disappeared, no one ever saw her again. When John studies the blueprints, he discovers another possible entrance. It is located beneath the staircase. When he checks the spot at home, he finds the passage sealed with wooden boards, forcing him to pry them open. Once the boards are removed, he manages to crawl inside. But even there, the path leading to the basement is blocked again by another barrier. Still determined, John drills a small hole so he can peek inside. Unfortunately, he barely gets the chance to see anything. Sarah suddenly appears, forcing him to quickly climb out before she notices what he has done. Later that night, John receives a call from Alyssa. He answers immediately, and they arrange to meet. The next day, they meet inside a parking structure. The confrontation quickly becomes tense. Alyssa insists that John has betrayed her and claims that he should have been with her all along. John makes it clear that he loves his wife and has no intention of leaving Sarah. When she realizes she cannot change his mind, Alyssa threatens to expose their past affair and destroy his life. John responds with a warning of his own. If Alyssa ever tries to approach Sarah, the consequences will be deadly. Several days pass. John continues spending his time lost in thought, often going out for long jogs. Meanwhile, Sarah focuses on designing the nursery for their future baby, even though she is not pregnant yet. Then one day, Sarah suddenly feels nauseous and begins vomiting. Curious, she decides to take a pregnancy test. To her surprise, the result is positive. Sarah is pregnant, even without continuing the IVF program. Overwhelmed with happiness, she accidentally drops the test. When she bends down to pick it up, she notices a rolled piece of paper hidden under the bed. The paper turns out to be the blueprint of the house. At that moment, Sarah realizes that John must have been secretly investigating the basement. She studies the blueprint and sees the exact route leading to the basement. The markings show that the passage has already been opened. At the same time, Alyssa suddenly arrives at the house. Her intention is clear. She wants to destroy the marriage between John and Sarah. She knocks on the door, but no one answers. With no response, Alyssa decides to enter the house on her own and eventually makes her way upstairs. There she finds Sarah's pregnancy test. The sight overwhelms her. Alyssa begins to break down before quickly leaving the house. Not long after, Sarah climbs out from the basement passage and immediately notices that the front door has been left open. Meanwhile, John is jogging along the roadside while talking on the phone with a coworker. As he finishes the call, he suddenly sees Alyssa's car driving away from the direction of his house. John immediately assumes that Alyssa has done something to Sarah. Without hesitation, he jumps into action and begins chasing the car. But whatever happened during that pursuit remains unclear. By the time the day ends, John only returns home late at night. When he arrives, Sarah is furious that his jogging somehow lasted until nightfall. But before the argument can grow, Sarah shares the news that she is pregnant. The announcement shifts the mood completely, and the issue of Alyssa visiting the house never gets discussed. Since Sarah already knows John tried to break into the basement, she firmly asks him to stop thinking about it. Now that she is pregnant, she does not want to risk losing the mansion. In the end, John reluctantly agrees and lets the matter go. The couple returns to working on the nursery together. Not long after, John receives a phone call. The company informs him that the investigation is over and he is cleared of all accusations. He is officially allowed to return to work. A few days later, when John goes back to the office, one of his co-workers mentions that Alyssa has taken leave, claiming she needs time to recover. Whenever the company tries to contact her regarding the harassment case, she refuses to respond. Later, while John and Sarah continue working on the baby's room, John accidentally discovers a small hole hidden behind a painting. When he checks it more closely, he finds a bullet lodged inside the wall. The discovery immediately makes him paranoid again. In his mind, everything begins connecting. Emmett, the locked basement, and the old story about Emmett's wife who disappeared. John starts to believe he has uncovered the truth. He becomes convinced that Emmett murdered his own wife and hid her body somewhere inside the basement. A few days later, while John is at work, the police suddenly arrive at his office asking about Alyssa. It turns out she has been reported missing. Her car was discovered abandoned near a remote lake, far from the city. For now, the authorities suspect that Alyssa may have done something drastic. John cannot help feeling uneasy. The last thing he wants is to become involved in the investigation, especially if his past affair with Alyssa comes to light. Meanwhile, Sarah meets Catherine for coffee. During their conversation, Sarah finally asks what Catherine meant when she said she hoped they could survive living in that house. Catherine explains that several families have lived there before, but none of them stayed for long. The most recent one was the family of Paul McManus. According to Catherine, each family eventually left the house suddenly, almost as if their relationships fell apart after moving in. While they are talking, a news report appears on television about Alyssa's disappearance and the discovery of her car. Later that evening during dinner, Sarah brings up the news about Alyssa. John shares the information he heard from the police and his co-workers. However, Sarah remembers something Catherine mentioned earlier. Catherine had said she often saw John jogging during the day. That comment makes Sarah curious about what has really been happening with her husband. Quietly, she decides to check John's laptop and emails. There she finds a message about his suspension from work due to the accusations made by Alyssa. Sarah also looks through his phone records and notices several calls between John and Alyssa. The discovery makes her wonder if John might somehow be connected to Alyssa's disappearance. At the same time, John continues obsessing over the bullet he found earlier. He compares it with the bullets from Emmett's old gun collection and realizes they match perfectly. Once again, John tries to explain his theory to Sarah, but Sarah dismisses it and insists there is nothing strange about it. While they are arguing, the doorbell suddenly rings. The police are standing outside. As the officers ask questions, Sarah quietly listens nearby. During the conversation, it becomes clear that John once had a secret relationship with Alyssa. The police then ask where John was on the day Alyssa disappeared. John claims he spent the entire day at home. The officers ask for proof to support his statement. At that moment, Sarah steps forward and confirms that her husband was indeed with her at home all day. After the police leave, the tension between John and Sarah finally explodes. Their argument grows intense, and Sarah eventually reaches a disturbing conclusion. In her mind, John must be responsible for Alyssa's disappearance. John's thoughts spiral further into chaos. Ever since they moved into the mansion, his life has steadily fallen apart. Desperate for answers, he decides to find Paul. When John finally meets him, he realizes that Paul is the same distressed man who once tried to burn the house. During their conversation, Paul struggles to explain everything clearly, but one message becomes obvious. The basement door must be opened. John asks if Paul also signed the same contract when he lived there. Paul admits that signing that contract is the biggest regret of his life. In the end, Paul leaves John with two choices. If John wants peace, he must leave the house. Otherwise, the only way forward is to open the basement door. After meeting Paul, John rushes home and urges Sarah to leave the house immediately, but Sarah refuses. The idea of walking away from a luxurious mansion that cost them nothing is something she cannot accept. John is already fed up and desperate to escape the house. Determined to end everything, he decides to break the lock on the basement door himself. Just as the lock finally gives way, Sarah suddenly strikes him on the head. John collapses and loses consciousness. When John wakes up, Sarah pulls out Alyssa's phone and reveals the truth. While she was checking the basement that John had broken into earlier, she heard strange noises and the sound of the front door opening. Thinking someone had entered the house, Sarah armed herself with a weapon from Emmett's old gun collection and went to investigate. When she reached the main floor, she discovered Alyssa inside the house. Alyssa, still obsessed and unstable, had no intention of letting John go. She moved to attack Sarah, forcing Sarah to shoot her in self-defense. One of the shots struck the wall. After Alyssa died, Sarah wrapped the body and hid it inside the basement. The car John had chased earlier was actually being driven by Sarah. During the pursuit, John eventually lost sight of the vehicle at an intersection. Sarah then abandoned the car near a quiet lake far from the city. To avoid suspicion, she sent a fake email from Alyssa's account to the office, making it appear that Alyssa had taken leave and resigned from her job. So far, everything has gone according to her plan. After hearing the full story, John decides he cannot stay silent. He plans to report everything to the police and leave Sarah. But before he can move, Sarah suddenly points the gun at him and orders him to sit down. She explains that no one would believe his story anyway. If he goes to the police, they will almost certainly assume that John himself murdered Alyssa. Sarah even describes how the story would unfold. According to her version, John would have shot Alyssa after she discovered his affair and confronted him about it. Listening to all of this, John is stunned. He never imagined that his wife could be capable of something this cold and calculating. In the end, Sarah gives him a choice. They can continue living together as a family, or she will raise the child alone after killing him. Faced with no way out, John has no choice but to accept the situation. Several months later, the couple holds a celebration for the 7th month of Sarah's pregnancy. From the outside, everything appears normal, but John is no longer the same man he once was. During the celebration, they receive a package from Emmett. Inside is a letter and a key to the basement door. When the basement is finally opened, they discover something completely unexpected. The basement is empty. Emmett explains that the locked basement was never meant to hide anything. It was simply a test for the couple. By surviving everything without opening it before receiving the key, they have proven themselves. As a result, the mansion now fully belongs to them. So the moral of the story is, if someone gives you a free mansion with one rule, maybe just follow the rule and stop snooping around like a detective.